Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at the game between Andrea Botez and Dina Belenkaya from the Mogul Chessboxing Championship. I'm only going to go over the chess portion of the match here, so if you want to see the full match, which includes the boxing as well, you can check out Ludwig's video, which I will link in the description below. So let's get started. Andrea had the white pieces and Dina had the black pieces. So white starts off with d4, Dina answers with knight f6, and Andrea goes bishop f4. Basically going into a London system and saying, hey, I want to play a solid game here, not take too many chances, and hopefully not create too many complications in this position. Here, black played d6, e3, h6, knight f3, and g5. So after g5, Dina's basically saying, okay, I'm going to play some aggressive chess and hopefully induce some mistake in white's position. White played bishop g3, bishop g7, bishop d3, just normal developing moves. Knight h5 was played, so attacking this bishop on g3. Note that this knight is undefended on h5, so potentially if something like e5 was played later in the future, after let's say like knight d7, white could take on e5 because of this open attack on the h5 knight. Now obviously you'd have to calculate the whole thing through, but it's just important to note that this knight is undefended on this square. So after knight h5, white played the move knight bd2, knight c6 was played, and c3. Just reinforcing the pawn on d4 with these two pawns. And here, black played the move e6. e4 was played by white, and black immediately went knight f4. So this is really one of the more interesting positions in the game because you have this question, should you take this knight? I think white made the correct decision by just taking the knight on f4 with the bishop, so bishop takes f4 was played, g takes f4, and queen e2. And here I noticed that although black has the two bishops now and maybe an open g-file to work with, it's not really that great of a position for black in my opinion. I think the commentary during the match was saying otherwise because they thought black had chances here. However, I think that white's significantly better here. So black played bishop d7, white played a4 and black went a5, so this was an interesting inclusion. I think a4 was trying to discourage black from castling on the queen side later and, threatening to launch an attack immediately, and a5 was just a way to sort of prevent any expansion on the queen side for the moment. But in this position, I believe white could have played the move e5. The point of e5 is that if you take or push d5, your f4 pawn is going to be pretty much a goner. Because it's just the structure is just so fractured on the king side, and also it just seems like white has some good squares for their pieces. So for example, if black plays d takes e5, which would be probably not a great option, d takes e5 will be played. Like I said before, this f4 pawn is going to be picked up eventually, and white has some good squares for their pieces. So instead of this, however, Andrea played the move knight c4 after a5, so knight c4 was played, and here I thought that black would try and go e5 at some point to try and secure this chain and open up this light squared bishop. However, black did not do that. She played the move queen e7 and white played queen d2. So already threatening this f4 pawn, and black has to do something about it. So black played d5. After d5, note that if you take on d5 with the e pawn, black can recapture and open up a check on white's king. So white played the very good move, knight a3 in this position, keeping the tension in the center. And here, black played d takes e4, bishop takes e4, and f5. After f5, white has the option of going bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, and queen takes f4, picking up a pawn. However, it's not really that clear because black has the two bishops and maybe an open g-file in the future. And it's not really clear which side white is going to castle on. For example, if you want to castle, let's say black castles queenside, you don't want to go kingside for sure because the open g-file is just staring right at you and the bishop on c6 is going to become an absolute monster. And you don't really want to go queenside either because then this a4 pawn falls, and really the two bishops should be enough to give black enough play to compensate for the pawn here. So, and also white really doesn't want to go into an overly complicated middle game. So white chose to play the move bishop c2 instead of bishop takes c6. After bishop c2, black played the move e5, trying to open up the center. And here, white played d5, trying to keep it closed, which I did not like because I thought the move castles queenside was better. So if castles queenside, the one thing that is important to note is that you really shouldn't take on d4 if you're black, because well, here rook e1 is a huge problem, but even without rook e1, the principle of taking the pawn wouldn't be that good because you're sort of fracturing your structure even more, and you have these two doubled isolated pawns over here. But instead, the move that looks very attractive and obvious, which is e4, is actually not that great because white has the move queen takes f4 in this position. So if white didn't have queen takes f4, this could be pretty viable for black. However, after queen takes f4, note that you can't take on f3 because after rook he1, pinning the queen to the king, if you block with bishop e6, d5 is absolutely crushing and white will be winning here. You know, with all these incoming threats, bishop takes f5 as well. So after queen takes f4, the one move that I was looking at after white takes this pawn would be castle's queenside, because if white was just forced to move their knight back or go knight h4 in this position, then I could see like a position where black could get an advantage, because even though you're down a pawn, you now open up your two bishops in something like h5, bishop h6, and mobilize your center pawns. This would be pretty normal for black. However, if white plays precisely, this is going to be pretty much a disaster for black. So after castle's queenside, white can play the move knight b5. So let me just get rid of these arrows. Knight b5, threatening mate, so there's no time to take on f3. And if black decides to defend this by going bishop e6 and defending laterally, white can play the move knight h4 in this position, so threatening both knight g6 and knight takes f5. Here, black can try and get creative with something like queen g5, hoping that white exchanges the queens and fixes the pawn structure, forcing knight g6 and then rook h6, and then black should be doing pretty well here. But here, white can play the move knight g6 immediately, which is really a fancy counterattack because you can't take the knight because suddenly queen takes c7 is a threat. Note that you can't do it now, obviously, because it's pinned. But after knight g6, really there's not much for black to do. The best move would be something like rook hg8, but even here, white can just play king b1. After king b1, now there's no pin, so queen takes c7 is a threat. And really, there's nothing you can do about it. If you take on f4, then you're just going to be worse because, I mean, this position, your knight has got a great outpost square on f4 and white's up a pawn. And if you try and defend the c7 square with something like rook d7, suddenly you run into even more problems with a move like d5, where after d5, if black takes on d5 with a bishop, rook takes d5 can be played, and so you can't take back because of mate on c7. And if you take the queen first, you can take back with a knight, which simultaneously defends this rook on d5. So after all this, it's pretty clear that this position would be pretty favorable for white, which is why after e5, I believe castle's queenside would have been a good option. However, white chose to play the move d5 in this position, and black responded immediately with e4. So after e4, white castled kingside, which I thought was a bad decision because when you castle kingside in this position, you're really castling into first the open g file and this like incoming pawn storm over here. But after castle's kingside, black decided to go the opposite way with castle's queenside, or sorry, knight e5 first. I was going to say white should have castled queenside because if you castle queenside here, then at least in this position where black goes knight e5, which is what happened in the game, your king's not going to be just in the middle of an incoming like attack, where pretty much white's just going to get slaughtered. Here, you can probably get away with something like knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, and knight c4, and the game continues. But after castle's kingside, it's not looking good because after black played the move knight e5, it's really not so clear how you're going to stop like just trading the knights and then black's going to go f3 and rook g8 and just kill you. So after knight e5, white really had to find some precise moves to stay in this game. So white chose knight d4 in this position. After knight d4, black immediately kept the attack going with the move f3. And here I thought this might have been white's last chance to salvage this game by playing the move g takes f3. After g takes f3, you can't take with a knight because if knight takes f3, knight takes f3, pawn takes f3, you have rook e1 here, which is just game over for black. If you just block with bishop e5, white can simply play rook takes e5, queen takes e5, and rook e1, pinning the queen to the king, and that should be all she wrote. So basically, after you take on f3, black must take with the pawn instead. And here I thought white should go either rook e1 or king h1, try to get the rook on the g file, and you can probably survive in this position, because although it seems like white's king is in danger, black's king is still in the center, and white has some threats of their own, like bishop takes f5, knight takes f5. And so this is still pretty complicated, although I do believe black is better in this position. But after f3, white played the move g3. I didn't like this move because although it looks like it sort of maintains the compact structure around the king, it really introduces a very simple plan for black, which is just going queen f7, either the g6 or h5, and then just sneaking in here. Just queen f7, queen h5, queen h3, and queen g2. And this plan is, although white can try their best to prevent it, it seems pretty obvious for black that they should go for this, and it really introduces a simple path to victory for black, just getting their queen into the position, maybe moving their knight to g4 as well. So after g3, black played the move, so here knight d4, f3, g3, black played the move h5 in this position, trying to open up the h-file with h4 and making it easier for the black pieces to infiltrate the king side. White played the move knight a b5, trying to get some counterplay with knight takes c7, but black simply ignores it. Black plays bishop h6. Here, you can't take on c7. Well, you can, but it wouldn't be good, because if knight takes c7, king d8 attacks your knight. So you've got an attack on the knight and an attack on the queen. The only way to save your piece is by going knight to e6 check. However, after bishop takes e6, knight takes e6 check, the key move queen takes e6. If you take the queen and bishop takes d2, it looks like white's going to regain their piece with the move rook d1, pinning the bishop to the king. However, this position would not be good at all for white. In fact, the computer says it's pretty much lost. After king e7, you can take on d2, h4 can be played, and basically, although white's actually up material in this position, although the e6 pawn is a goner, this position is lost because black's just going to break through on the king side and checkmate white. So I will show a sample line here. So if white goes rook d5, you can actually ignore it by playing h takes g3, and if white picks up the free knight, then rook takes h2 is crushing, because this rook is coming to h8 and white's getting mated. So let's just show a sample line. If you take on g3 with the pawn, black can just go rook g2 check, king h1, and rook h8 checkmate. So this is why this position would be dangerous even in the endgame. So this just shows that black really has everything under control and has figured out what to do against knight takes c7. But after bishop h6, white chose to play the move queen d1, getting out of this attack. So now knight c7 is a real threat. Here, after queen d1, black played the move queen g5. So saying that if you take on c7, it won't matter because you can pick up all the material on the queen side you want. I'm simply going to checkmate you after going queen g4, queen h3, moves like that. So after queen g5, white took the bait and played knight takes c7. King f7 was played, and king h1, trying to prevent immediate mate on the king side. However, black continued with the move queen g4. And here, actually, I should mention that one of the moves that I was looking at during the game was actually the move h4. And the point of h4 is that when you go queen g4, I thought maybe white could try something like king h2, just preventing the queen from going to h3. However, this would be lost as well, because black has the really nice move bishop f4, which pins this pawn to the king. So if you take, you just get mated immediately. And after bishop f4, the threat of queen takes h4 is very real, because you can't take the queen because of this pin. So this would be winning for black as well. But I was just looking for ways that white could potentially salvage this position, but it looked pretty bad at this point, because although you're just winning a bunch of material over here, it's not going to matter. Black's going to checkmate you with queen g4 and queen h3. So white chose king h1, queen g4 was played anyway, and white played d6 in this position. So white did not want to go pick up any more material. They just wanted to open up potential attacks on the black king to try and get some counterplay and salvage this position. Unfortunately, it was too late, and black closed in with the move queen h3. Here, white played bishop b3 check, the first of many spy checks in this position. So bishop b3 check, king g6 was played, and here white played the move rook g1, so stopping queen g2 mate. However, after knight g4, it seems like queen takes h2 and knight takes f2 are threats that you really can't stop. You can stop like one of them, but you can't stop both. So here, white actually played the move knight takes f3, stopping the threat of queen takes h2, but allowing knight takes f2 checkmate. However, Dina missed the move knight takes f2 in the game, probably because they had been boxing as well throughout this match. So they had like alternating rounds of chess and boxing. So I don't want to fault any player for making some mistakes later in the match, because it was definitely very difficult to play chess and then go to boxing and then come back to chess. But knight takes f2 definitely was a move that she could have played, it, which would have won the game. However, after knight takes f3, Dina played e takes f3, and I mean, it's just mate in a few moves, really. After e takes f3, knight takes f2 is still a threat, and queen takes h2, and now there's definitely no way to stop the incoming mate threat. If something like rook g2, you just take it with the queen, so really queen takes h2 is unstoppable. So Andrea tried the last spy check. She played the move bishop f7 check, king h7, and bishop g6 check. But as soon as black figured out that there was going to be no more checks after this, she just took on g6 with the king. And in this position, Andrea Botez resigned because there's no way to stop mate, and also there's no way in the match to get to the next boxing portion. There was simply not enough time in the match. So after this position, Andrea resigned, and Dina won the game. I thought this was a pretty interesting game, and definitely one that was really exciting to watch live. I definitely recommend you guys watch Ludwig's video, because really, like, to understand this game fully, you'd have to watch the whole match. But I'm not a boxing expert, so I only can comment on the chess. Well, thank you guys so much for watching my video. I hope you guys enjoyed this game, and I hope you guys enjoyed the match, which you can see, like I said, on Ludwig's channel, which I'll link in the description. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.